Welcome to Austen Mondays. I am your host, Edward G. Pettit from the Rosenbach Museum and Library in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And for 24 weeks, we're going on a biblioventure with Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice. And for today's special episode, Keira and all the rest, we're talking about the Pride and Prejudice film and TV adaptations, not including the 1995 BBC TV one with Jennifer Ehle and Colin Firth. For that one, you can watch Darcy's Wet Shirt, episode 6 of Austen Mondays. But for the rest of them, joining me tonight to discuss these adaptations, 2 of our 3 chapter annotation co-hosts, Dr. Kathleen Hudson and Casey MacMillan. Hello to you both.
Hello. Hello.
Unfortunately, Lauren Nixon won't be able to join us tonight. We're very sorry about that, although she did want me to tell people about how she met Rosamund Pike when she worked in Bath, right, Kathleen? Kathleen's probably heard this.
Which I'm very jealous about. And I actually don't know the story that well, but I would love to have met Rosamund Pike, and she has apparently gotten to do that. So that's not bad.
Rosamund Pike played Jane Bennet in the 2005 one with Keira Knightley as her sister Elizabeth. And Lauren also said that Chatsworth, which filled in for Pemberley, is way too big and fancy for it to be actually Pemberley. So, there you go. All righty. That was,
I've heard others say the same.
Yeah.
I am sure Lauren would have had a great deal more to share with us on this. And I'm sorry she can't be here. But that's what we get tonight. We get the 3 of us, and that'll be even more for us to talk. And we're not going to stop talking, I'm sure, as usually goes with the show. Usually we begin our show with a segment called A Turn About the Room, when I talk with a special guest, a brilliant Austen scholar, creator, or Janeite about Austen and her works. And while we won't have one this week, we will have one next week on episode 15. Author Stephanie Barron will be joining me. Stephanie writes the Jane Austen mystery series. It's been going on for, 25 years, something like that, over 25 years. So she is shortly to end that series because she has gotten up to 1817 in Jane's life as a sleuth solving mysteries. We didn't know that. That's what she did. They found all these manuscripts that Jane had written where she solved crimes. They're really wonderful novels, and she writes a great Austen. So I'm very happy to have her here next week. But let's actually start today's show with what some of us, not all of us, are drinking with Jane and Ed. And I thought we should, every week I enjoy a cocktail during the show. A drink that I create and I tie into the chapters that we cover, whatever. But today, my cocktail is wine, and I'm calling it Jane's favorite because that's what she would have had to drink during these. I had that great quote from her letter. We talked about that letter in one of the past episodes. I could talk about Lauren. I'm not sure. I believe I drank too much wine last night at Hurstbourne. Jane once wrote to her sister Cassandra, and there are. I did print up some ingredients for this, for Jane's favorite, and that is pour wine into a glass, drink, and repeat at will. So there you go. That's what I'm having tonight.
Repeat, new sip for every awful proposal you get.
Such efficiency of action.
Yes, exactly.
Oh, and I have a mulled wine. It's a sweet red, so I thought that someone gave us for Christmas. So I thought, it'd be nice. I put some mulling spices in it.
I do like a good mulled wine. Tis the season for it, for sure.
Oh, yeah, we do a lot of that. We have spiced apple wine we like to do and heat up. Oh yeah, I love that stuff.
I am 9 days into my flirtation with dry January, which means I'm putting the H in wine now.
And I'm being very boring and drinking tea. So.
Just fine.
It's my evening tea.
Yes. In a Halloween mug, I see.
In my Halloween mug, in my giant boo mug. That's just.
There you go. Only 295 days. I can't remember to Halloween, so something like that. So
it's not nearly soon enough. So to suit me.
But whatever beverage you're having, it's to binge watch, to watch a lot of movies, you should be most comfortable, and that's why I'm choosing this. So There's lots to do. I think we'll start with Keira Knightley and this Keira and all the rest of 2005, and then hopefully we'll be able to hit some others. I'm sure we'll have a lot to say about 2005, but for those who might not be familiar with a lot of them, there's an old 1940 film with Laurence Olivier and Greer Garson. There's the 1980 BBC TV series that preceded the 95 with Jennifer Ely and Colin Firth. And there's also all kinds of adaptations that are retellings in a way, like Bridget Jones' Diary, and then the TV miniseries Lost in Austen and Fire Island, which was on Hulu last year, which I just rewatched. I love, and of course Pride and Prejudice and Zombies, which I once taught in college to students, which was a lot of fun. I think you have too, Kathleen, haven't you?
I haven't taught it. I do have many opinions on it. And when I taught the Sense and Sensibility class for the Rosenbach, we did do a section on sensibility and sea monsters, which is not the same author, but is the same kind of type of monster that they went through a phase. It was Pride, Prejudice, and Zombies, Sensibility, and Sea Monsters, and Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter. And those were the three that they sort of did a bunch of mashups on that.
Actually, yeah, but actually the first two were still Quirk. The Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter was not Quirk, but Quirk also did a prequel to Pride and Prejudice and Zombies called Dawn of the Dreadfuls.
Yes, Dawn of the Dreadfuls,
It was a completely new novel. It wasn't like Austen.
That's right. It was a different public, but it was the same author as Pride and Prejudice. It was Seth.
No, it wasn't Seth Graham Smith for the Dawn of the Dreadfuls. It was
but for Abraham Lincoln Vampire.
Oh, yeah, Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter. That was Seth Graham Smith still. We will get.
Well, I quite like. I think Casey maybe mentioned that she didn't like the book, but she liked the film version. Not to get started on this right now, but
we'll hit that a little later. Maybe we'll even get the Wishbone first impression.
I love it.
First F-U-R-S-T. I love that pun that they did for Wishbone.
F-U-R-S-T.
So let us. We already have a question for 2005. Let's start on 2005. Directed by Joe Wright, with Keira Knightley famously as Elizabeth, Matthew McFadden as Darcy. And I'm sure at least you guys especially remember when this came out. I do, and I also remember a lot of kind of Austen purists kind of like, oh, what are they doing? I mean, this is a little too emotional, too too much like Bronte, turning Austen into a kind of Bronte story. I always liked it. It never overtook the 95 for me, but I certainly know that, my youngest daughter, certainly it's her favorite. And I think a lot of people that it's their first, it becomes their favorite. Kathleen, let's start with you.
Yeah. At the risk of dating myself a little bit and my age, this was actually my first. I had not, the 95 version was just a little bit before my time. Not that I was alive when it came out, but it was not something, I was not of an age to watch it when it came out. So when I was of an age so I would have been about 16, 15 or 16. So that was like the key perfect age. And that was really I think I had seen the bits and pieces of the 95 on TV, but I hadn't sat down, I think, necessarily and watched it. So the one that I have the biggest sense memory for really is the 2005. And it's funny again.
But you were an Austen person already, like you had been reading.
Yes, yeah. Oh, I had read Austen, the books.
So
yeah. And yeah, I was in love. I was in love with the books. But I wasn't necessarily in love with Pride and Prejudice as much. I mean, I had read it. I think I was very into Sense and Sensibility at that point because the accompanying, I had seen the movie that accompanied that as well. Mm-hmm. And I was, I was sort of working my way through. Actually, I want to say Mansfield Park at that point might have been my favorite, just because I was very, entangled. That one has so much like interior drama in it that I was just very drawn into that. But I was at that point of my life, I was just reading all of them. Anything Austen, anything Bronte, anything, and I was just consuming them at such a pace. But yeah, no, that when that came out, so that it's funny that I was rewatching it today because I've been sick with COVID, and that has always been my comfort movie that I watch when I'm sick. It's always been a movie that I watch with my mom because it's her favorite adaptation. She's definitely in the Matthew McFadden camp. Like she loves Colin Firth, but Matthew McFadden for her is where it's at. And so I know it gets a lot of criticism because it's a movie length. I mean, the 1995 has the benefit of being a multi-episode thing, so it can include. I think one of the questions asked, why did it cut out these characters? It cuts out a lot, and I mean, rewatching it today after having reread the book, you are very aware of how much it does cut. It cuts out whole characters.
Yeah.
It really condenses a lot of conversations. I mean, I think it does quite a bit of its condensing very well. Rewatching the film, the whole problem with Bingley and Jane being too shy and Bingley not getting it, but him being kind of a puppy, there were a lot of moments in it, and that's 110%, I think, very much down to it's not 110%. Most of that's down to the actors being very brilliantly subtle and complex in how they are presented. I mean, again, Rosamund Pike, who I would watch in anything, I think does a brilliant job of conveying that kind of, I'm interested, but I'm reserved, and without making it, she takes what it has the chance to sort of be unpacked and breathe over multiple episodes in the 1995 version, and she only maybe has a couple of seconds of screen time to condense that. Yeah. And she does it very well, and all the actors do. I mean, this is in many ways a dream cast for me for a lot of these characters. So I think it's constrained by the fact that it has that kind of limitations. I also think, I mean, my belief is anything that came after the Emma Thompson Sense and Sensibility is an adaptation of the Emma Thompson Sense and Sensibility. But by default, I mean, it was, I had not gone to England to study before, but when I had watched the film the first time. So that was really my first glimpse of the Peaks District of Chatsworth. I know it's a large house, but I adore the houses in it. I adored the landscapes. I think it's just a beautiful film, and I think it's just one of those things where it gives me such comfort to watch it. I think in part because I'm just having an almost aesthetic reaction to how it looks. That I'm just like, it's just so sweeping and beautiful that I'm willing to forgive, it not being 100% to the book adaptation, because it's beautiful. And I think it captures enough of the original feeling of it. I know that it gets a lot of criticism for the almost kiss and for the, slight bodice ripper kind of thing. But I think that too, I mean, if this is coming in the early 2000s, this is the shift from, this is the new masterpiece era where they're shifting away from the very stuffy sort of drawing room, rigid BBC framework, which again, it's all in what you imprint on. It's all what you're sort of grow up with, but they're trying to shift very much into a, let's take these implied things and put them out in the open more, which I can get behind. So sorry, I've gone on for a while now.
That's fine. And that I think you can see a progression in that in like older BBCs, like the 1981 or even other BBC ones, to the 95, which starts to break out a little more.
Yes. Yeah.
And then now they're all like little films.
Yeah, and because Masterpiece in this country definitely did a massive rebranding shift, and I know people who watch it now can see they've got intros by Laura Linney, and they've got the new graphics, and all you need to do is really compare older adaptations of, again, Sense and Sensibility to the recent one where there's a duel actually in there and it's all sexy, and it's trying to rebrand these classics for a new generation. And I resent slightly the implication that a new generation would not be interested in something unless there was sufficient, sort of bodice ripper, attention grabber stuff in it. But I think it's good because it does. I mean, Austen, there are many things that she implies that you as a reader have to read between the lines. And I don't think it's a bad thing to then bring that out and tease out that stuff visually in adaptations. I mean, the fact that they include in the 95 version, Darcy hunting Wickham down.
Yeah.
I think that's not in the book, but including stuff like that, I think is important, and does then open the conversation to more stuff about class, about the war. Yeah.
And I would say twofold, because as you point out, Kathleen, time is compressed. To show us those moments is vital to teasing out the subtleties. Novels, even in Austen's like third person omniscient, novels are necessarily internal. So teasing out the internal and making it external action is moving it from the two-dimensionality of the page into a visual medium and an oral medium. I have a lot to say about the 2008, and one of them is that the sound is beautiful.
Yes.
So yeah, the fact that it is more sweeping than private set in drawing rooms is a necessary translation into the medium, as well as a reflection of, yes, the late aughts and the mini movies of Masterpiece and the Downton Abbey-ification of, wait, we could be successful.
I like that, the Downton Abbey-ification, because that's it. Yeah. That's, I mean, yeah.
And I think that they're the experiments into more popular grabbing entertainment, I don't think is a bad thing, and I don't think undermines what Austen set out to do. Now, we'll get into this. I think of 2008 as Joe Wright.
It's 2005, right?
Oh, 5. Thank you. Sorry. It's so predates Downton Abbey, but still it's in the air.
Yeah.
I will sort of like start by saying, you're not wanting to own your age when you came of age during 2005 makes me feel like Lady Catherine de Bourgh, because I graduated from high school in 95.
Hardly ask me to own to that, though.
You must be able to own it.
Whatever the age is, we're admitting to nothing. Nothing.
Yeah. I think we do. We imprint on the one we saw first. We imprint on the moment that was most profound. The novels you read as a child, or the visual media you take in those teenage years, it more shapes identity to a certain extent, I believe, than things you encounter as an adult. So yeah, I have a dear friend who grew up watching the 1980 Pride and Prejudice, and loves it and returns to it. But I watched the 95 first and was attuned to those larger vistas and that grand ambitious scope. So you put me in front of those like tiny sound stages with the hair that is much late 70s as it is Regency, and
the bouffant. Yeah.
Oh, I can't take it. Yeah, I can't watch Dr. Zhivago either for that same, like I can't take it. So there's value there that's lost on me because it wasn't the thing I imprinted to. So I'm less likely to forgive the things that compare ill favorably to the one I love most,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that happens with Sherlock. People that like the Sherlock adaptations, they're your first Sherlock, and the older you are, it's like Basil Rathbone, or then they'll get to Jeremy.
Oh, Brent. I was going to say mine's Jeremy Brent. because
yeah.
they used to tape those back when
But my kids are
things.
Benedict. I have Benedict Cumberbatch kids, and that's their Sherlock. And every other Sherlock is going to be like not their Sherlock, and they get that. And I think that very much happens with Pride and Prejudice. We spent so much time talking about the 95 and the episode in episode 6, because that is such a strong marker for so many people, and even some of these ones we see now. Now, I think Joe Wright in making this knew that already. I mean, he knew how revolutionary that was, and also even the Emma Thompson Sense and Sensibility have such an impact on the way Austen is going to be portrayed. And I think he succeeded in not doing those things that they did, but it didn't hurt his film. It didn't seem like he was trying to not do it, which I think happens sometimes for people creating things. They work too hard to not be that. But I think it's the vision that he had to create this, or at least the producers had as well, that it's coherent without being one of those others, or an answer to one of those others, in a sense.
I think that's beautifully said. I will say that there are some of the changes. I don't consider myself a purist. I think I've talked too much about Jaff here publicly on camera to claim that, but some of the interpretive choices he makes just don't align with the interpretive choices I would make as an artist.
True. Yeah.
You know, and so, you know, like resetting the time period, I'm like, what's wrong with the bodices in the right? You know, like, because I'm also a costume historian, and I'm sure I will rant about wigs later. But you know what,
he's moved it late 18th century, right? I mean, it is like 1790s.
Ooh, that would be a much more exaggerated silhouette. Someone on the chat will fill us in on the exact. It feels to me like the bodices have gotten a little longer, so I think it's actually a little bit later.
Okay.
But yeah, it's the silhouettes are a little different, and yeah, if we are feeling uncharitable, that's a thing I could seize on. But you know, so here's what I come to. The experience I've had over the fall, over these weeks of rereading the novel so closely, is one of the experiences I've had is that I realized the extent to which the Bingley in my mind is Crispin Bonham Carter, is the 95 Bingley, more so than the Bingley of the novel. As I reread, I'm shocked by how clever he is. And how much more he has to give to the conversation, how self-effacing he is, how he is a better friend match for Darcy than he is in my mind, because I'm influenced by the 95. So all that's a long way to your point, Ed, of Joe Wright is doing his own thing instead of being an answer. I would say in terms of that one character, in terms of Bingley, it feels to me a reinterpretation of Crispin Bonham Carter's Bingley that moves us even further away, because he's delightful. He's a beautiful comic creation, but that sweet ginger is dumber than a box of hair.
He is, bless him.
He's just like, you know, if balloons had existed, he'd be like, oh, you know, like you can imagine someone blowing bubbles and him getting like distracted. It's delightfully comic, and it speaks to the compression of a novel into a film. It says a thing real fast, but it's not Bingley of Jane Austen's novel.
True, but for me, I look at it, doesn't work for this film, and it really works for this film. I mean, the way he gives it's such a super contrast to Darcy, and it also kind of makes him, I don't know. Jane doesn't come across as dim like as he is in this. So in a sense, it's almost like a little bit of a contrast with her. They are, it's almost like Jane is like almost like a Mr. Bennet and he's like a Mrs. Bennet in a sense meeting. And I kind of like that idea that he's the dimmer one in that couple is the man, not the woman.
I thought that, yes, I agree. I mean, I was kind of shocked too. It's funny you say that, because I think one of our the episodes that I did was early when they're discussing the library, and me thinking, wow, Bingley has a lot more to say than he usually does, because I'm picturing the ginger human version of a golden retriever. But I do, rewatching the film, I really think of all the things that I maybe didn't appreciate, but definitely appreciated this time, was how they did Bingley and Jane. Yeah, I think I mean, so one of the I think some of my frustration about Jane as a character is she does sometimes, I think incorrectly, come across as being so good as to be slightly dim. Like I think she is played that way in other adaptations and assumed to be such occasionally by Elizabeth herself. But how Rosamund Pike plays it is again so intelligent and so semi-maternal and also but just very genuine. And for Bingley too, you get snatches of the conversation. I guess I had missed this the first 10,000 times I did it, but they're discussing at one point, I think it's a horse who has died or someone who has died, and you only get like a 2-second part of the conversation, but that there is he comes across as really, but that there's a deeper that there are deeper elements to both of them in the conversation they're having that we're not seeing necessarily. Also, I love that part where he has failed to propose. It's at the end of the movie. He has tried to propose, failed, and goes, and Darcy basically is like, excuse me, and chases after them. And they have that, again, you don't hear the details of the conversation necessarily, but that he's modeling how he's supposed to go, like, okay, she was going to tell me to sit down. And I just felt like that was such a human and wonderful kind of insight into a friendship. And again, not necessarily the kind of friendship we get in the book, but that just seemed like such a, I'm always interested with adaptations in terms of what they leave out, but I'm more interested in what they include.
Yeah.
By accident. And I thought that was very sweet.
I read that
line to her. So I have been, what is it? I've been an unmitigated ass.
Yeah.
Comprehensive
I wish
ass.
Jane had written it. Yeah. Yeah.
We get part of that actual proposal scene, which is really nice, which we don't get in the novel either.
Yeah.
But that scene with him practicing for Darcy, it's also, I read it as him kind of taking control. Like,
yes.
He's still with Darcy, and Darcy has said it's okay, and so he's going with it. But he's at least being the one and saying, okay, I need to go in, and this is what I need to do. And it's not Darcy pretty much making him do it, or he's not doing it because Darcy thinks he should do it. He's now going to do it, and he's telling Darcy how he's going to do it in a way. By rehearsing it like that.
And then he goes back in alone. And then the next cut is to poor Jane basically crying because she's so happy. It's just so dear. But I do think the actors, again, did a lot with not a lot of time. And I think the writing was very good in that it did give them a couple spaces. It
is exceptionally well written it's Deborah Mogak wrote it. Exceptionally well, the way it's compressed, I think. It is how I always see that film. I mean, to be able to take so much of it and be able to hit so many high points in the novel. And also there's a lot of little funny lines in it that she's come up with on her own for this script. And I really like those, but we have an awful lot of questions actually. So I'm going to hit one of those and lead this in here. And I'm just going to hit the last one actually first. It's for KC from Julia. Curious about what Casey thinks about the acting, especially Keira Knightley, because you are our acting expert here. So, what do you think of Keira's performance?
Boy, especially Keira Knightley. I am always going to be, because I'm a director first and foremost. I think all my criticisms will always be to the directorial choices. I think part of the criticism of this film is unfairly aimed at Keira Knightley for not being Jennifer Ely. That's not her fault. I like Keira Knightley, and I think that she captures the impish spirit of Lizzie very well. I think she captures the resilience, sort of taking hits and recovering. I love to watch her face when she is taking something in that's horrible and watching her overcome that. I think it's really beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
But I think, part Partly with Keira Knightley, I always feel like she is ill-served by the fact that she started acting when she was a child, and I get the feeling she was always told she was very pretty and cute. So it gets for me sometimes a little pretty and cute. But I'm with you, Kathleen, on Rosamund Pike. She's a Jane for the ages, and I think I perfectly agree with the idea that she does very much with moments of stillness. She does very much with tiny beats of showing whole worlds.
Yeah.
One thing I will say, I feel like whether or not I'm on board with all the characterizations, I think the acting of this film is a coherent whole, which reflects a very clear-minded director and actors who are on board for that story and are doing it all together. And I think it's one of the strengths. There are things in the acting that I find more subtle than the 95.
I will just briefly jump in if I could point that I think I very much buy the Bennets as a family in this adaptation. They seem like a bunch of actors and therefore characters who are extraordinarily comfortable with each other. I love Brenda Blethyn. I'd watch her in anything, and I think she's a great Mrs. Bennet. Donald Sutherland seemed like a very strange choice to me, but you know what? He's good. And Mr. Collins, I mean, forget it. But this as the sisters, they just seem all very comfortable together. That's again, I would just watch them bounce around that beautiful house and be a family because they do seem to, connect very well together. As a non-expert opinion on the acting, they do seem to.
Yeah, that's what I mean. But I agree. That's what I mean by more subtle is that, and again, it's hard not to compare the two, but
you can't not do it though. It's bad, but yeah.
Look, Alison Steadman in the 95 is a great comic creation. So is Mary Bennett, but you're right, Kathleen, they don't all belong in the same family. They are less subtle than Austen's writing on the page. Whereas I completely agree. This is a family that sort of holds together.
Yeah.
And Brenda Blethyn, you take more seriously, which I think is good. I've made.
I love that line too. When you have 5 daughters fully grown, why don't you then tell me what's going to occupy your mind, which I thought was an excellent point. And I love the line that Elizabeth responds, yeah, but you don't know what it's like. And it's those small moments, those little lines where it's like, oh, hey, maybe this is why Mrs. Bennet is the way she is. And oh, hey, maybe this is why Elizabeth is the way she is. And, again, not really unpacking the family. I mean, I always thought with Austen, it's, so many of Austen's novels include within them love letters really to sisters. Love letters to family members. The romance is in there, but Sense and Sensibility, the romance is between Eleanor and Marianne. And in Pride and Prejudice, implicit in this is about relationships between women. So I just love that was unpacked. And I thought the actors did it again from a non-acting perspective. I thought I was so comfortable with the idea of them as a family.
That really strikes me. I hadn't thought about that because I see that, and I think what happens, especially when adapting this novel, is that Austen takes her time to describe, like, this is who this sister is, this is who this sister is, this is, and then so when somebody goes to adapt it, they kind of they box them and they kind of create them in that way. But in this film, that stuff is there, but they do seem like a unit. And I also think part of that is the change in the way Mr. and Mrs. Bennet are portrayed in this, which still works with the book, but it's just like it's kind of a different perspective on the way. Like Mr. Bennet's, wit and comments aren't kind of snide in this.
No, it's significantly less adversarial than any other.
Like he and Mrs. Bennet are really okay still.
And I think, but I think something gets lost there, and the pointedness, the danger that the novel presents. on either pole of not marrying or not marrying well, but also not marrying for enough affection, not being able to respect a partner. The fact that there's still those intimate moments sort of like in their chamber together between the Bennets, it's really sweet. And I think it's coherent to Joe Wright's vision in the movie, but I think that adversarial energy is something that Jane Austen is giving us. She's giving us a cautionary tale for marrying someone who is not your equal. Yep. And maybe that's my beef with super dumb Bingley, like dumbest of all the Bingleys, is, oh gosh, are we now in a territory where Jane might be in danger of someday no longer respecting her partner in life? I think it goes a little too easy, a little too sweetly on mismatches.
I can buy that too, also, again, with the Collinses, because I feel like certainly in the book and in other adaptations, Charlotte, even after she marries Mr. Collins, maintains more discomfort with him, I think, and definitely more autonomy. In this adaptation, once she marries Mr. Collins, she sort of becomes like a female version of that, not in an extreme way, but more, it seems, supportive than not, and certainly less. It's less. You're right in that. I think that the danger element of that's implicit in the novel is maybe trimmed down a little bit.
Charlotte has a line that's added in this that she doesn't, and when she first comes to Lizzie and explains it to her, and she's like, I have no fortune, I'm this age and all, and then she says right at the end, and I'm frightened.
Yeah, and you're frightened.
That's implied in the book, but she never states it. And that kind of extra thing really gives a little more motivation to her in the film as a character to really understand that, this is,
it's scary.
There's another slight change in that in the book, she talks about how, I like to keep Mr. Collins in the garden, and I have this room, but he doesn't like to come in here too much. In the film, she pretty much says, this is my parlor. Like, he doesn't come in here because it's mine. And that the film really makes the thing that she has carved out a space that's only hers and he's not allowed in it, which is always implied in the book in other versions. But this one, she states it outright that this space is hers.
There are, as you all know, I'm a member in many of the online Jane Austen Facebook pages, and the number of women who on their 27th birthday will post to the group, I'm 27 and I have no prospects. Don't you judge me, Lizzie, I'm frightened. It's probably one a month.
Yeah. I love also that line in that conversation, which is, but he's ridiculous, which is definitely a line I have used on when speaking of other people before. But he's ridiculous. Ridiculous.
We shouldn't pass up this. These are excellent boiled potatoes line, which is so hilarious.
When I was rewatching it, and he said an exemplary vegetable.
Yes.
I started laughing and I had to pause the film because I couldn't stop myself for about 2 minutes. Exemplary vegetable.
The line that launched 1,000 potato memes.
Yes. Yeah. I thought another actor who I thought did a very good Mr. Collins. Oh, very, very good. Yeah.
I would watch. Now I always get confused. Is it Tom Holland or Tom Hollander? The other one's Spider-Man.
I think it's Tom Hollander. It's Hollander. Yes.
Hollander.
It implies the existence of a Tom Holland-esque. Okay, who's that guy?
We cannot know him. He's too powerful.
Yeah, he's so smart. Yeah, he's in Lord of the Rings. Yeah. I would watch Tom Hollander do anything. I've had the privilege to see him on stage as well. He is electric. He's so good and so specific.
Yeah.
I think
proposal scene where he goes down on knee and she stands up, and the height is it's that talk about great, just so good. Poor man. And the dancing.
Let me hit one of these other questions because we did get to them, and then this is something we can then talk into about things that are left out of this as well. From Karen, why were Louisa and Mr. Hurst, the other Bingley sister, and Mr. Hurst cut out of this? She thinks that they are important to the plot. So that's our question. Are they important enough to the plot? And I mean, like the why, I mean, we can only guess as to why, but
Yeah.
the
I mean, I would assume time and expediency would be the why.
Does the film suffer for them not being there to have that extra layer of, I guess, anti-Bennett?
I mean,
Kathleen, you go.
For Mariah, the thing that stands out for me when she's included is when they're visiting Lady Catherine de Bourgh, and there's that awkward. But I feel like we're meant to understand that this woman is intimidating and rich, and that there's a distinction then, and we're all scared of her. I think we kind of get that, if only because it's Judi Dench and she's playing it very seriously, maybe without including another character to be like, yeah, this is super awkward. Hurst, I'm not. I don't know. I mean,
I will say, pursuing my new theory of, maybe we're going too soft and easy on bad marriages. Mr. Hurst's absolute uselessness, again, is one of those little like worst case scenarios over there of getting everything you wish for by marrying well, right? So I put that out there.
You're right.
And they do include the gardeners, who do seem like an idyllic marriage in many ways. Definitely a comfortable one, yes.
But again, this is a movie not about bad marriages. This is a movie about, making good marriages.
I'm more concerned about Caroline Bingley's missing dress bodice. I could bitch about underwear. We don't have.
She's supposed to be scary dragon lady person, apparently, and that's
in a corset without sleeves on it. It's incorrect.
I was I was kind of really surprised rewatching it. I'm like, I didn't realize that she was sans sleeves all the time, pretty much. Like every time I saw her, I was like, your sleeves are gone again, woman. You cover up. What is this?
Here's another change that someone mentions here is about the letter. Well, there's the proposal, Darcy's first proposal.
The very controversial. Yeah.
And then, but it's just after that with the letter that he writes. Now, what happens in the film is, instead of Elizabeth reading everything in the letter, the part about Jane and Bingley and what he did is kind of, he speaks that to her in that scene. And then the Wickham part is in the letter with him speaking, but it's, I'm sorry, I should have read the question said specifically, I love to hear your take on the scene where Lizzie reads the letter from Darcy. I've always thought that was a huge miss. We don't see her realization and transformation. And it's also much smaller, in length, as I was saying. What do you think?
Well, again, I'm coming at this purely from a non-directorial moment. I kind of would agree. It's not my favorite scene. It's interesting how they do it, because it's the middle of the night. She's staring at a mirror. He comes in and drops off the letter, and then it was always an improbable scene. And what I think probably happened, and I don't know this, was Joe Wright got a bit too artsy in that moment, trying to make this a very dynamic visual, and he obviously disconnected slightly from how that would actually work, which is he wouldn't come into the house in the middle of the night. That's a little bit creepy and weird. Also, why is she staring at the mirror and then at nothing? It isn't. I would argue that it's not necessarily not showing the transition, because she is looking at the mirror. She is kind of devastated. We don't necessarily see her read the letter, but Charlotte comes in right after. And, the devastation happens kind of scattershot after that. And the shift happens. And I think what we're seeing instead, if I recall, is him basically riding a horse through the thing. Yeah. So I can definitely agree. It's probably not the most dynamic way to do that. I'm not entirely sure why he framed it that way, but it seemed like he was going for something.
Yeah. Okay. So trying to how generously do I want to phrase this?
How forgiving do you want to be?
Yeah. How respectful do I want to be of the fact that Joe Wright had a very clear vision? And I think this moment is a part of it. Artistically, as a fellow director, I don't believe in that vision. Is if you see him, he seems very interested in weather and time of day, right? I think he has that idea in his head of that beautiful, like dawn, Darcy walking through the dew, probably in a dressing gown, but I can get over that because it's really beautiful. He's setting a lot of these scenes in rainy weather, and he's taking us through time of day. It's why so many scenes are just dark as heck. He's taking us through time of day to that beautiful dawn.
Yeah.
I get it as an impulse. I get it as a vision to hang a film around. For me, and maybe this makes me sound like a purist, but for me, as someone who loves this material and as a director, I am suspicious when you let your own vision take precedence over source material that is extant and beloved and has stood the test of a couple hundred years. With my directing students, I call it, wouldn't it be cool if? I think Joe Wright is saying like, oh, I've got this vision for the weather and it's going to be rainy most of the time. And it's going to be dark so that the clouds open and then they're facing each other at that end moment and the sun comes between them and it's going to be beautiful. It was beautiful. But I think he let that overtake service to the story that Jane Austen told. And I think Joe Wright's brilliant, but that wouldn't it be cool if, for me, it often smacks of ego, directorial ego. And if you're going to overrun the source material with your own vision, you better be able to defend that your vision's better than Jane Austen. And I don't think he always does that. And I will say, in terms of competing visions, I think probably why the proposal was shot in the rain was they saw the 1995 Darcy's wet shirt scene and they're like, you know what, we're gonna have, you know what's better than one person in a wet shirt? Two people in a wet shirt proposing to each other. Take that. What did they even
I think that was their Darcy's wet shirt.
I think it really adds to the Matthew McFadden's kind of look as this kind of puppy
wet dog
look, and makes him more, because I think it's a proposal scene in which it's still not right, but it's nowhere near as wrong as what happens in the novel or other adaptations when Darcy is just a complete jerk about it.
And we kind of talked about
it, and the rain adds to that. I'm standing here all wet in order to do this. So
we talked a little bit about the proposal scene and how it is actually quite almost not violent. That's not the word, but it's a lot harsher. That I think, you know, that she is harsh to him. You know, that it can be crueler. In some ways, it's worse than the Collins one, because the Collins one, there isn't that element of danger there. But this is they're being really awful to each other, and there is that element of danger. And of course they retranslated that into, oh, they almost kiss. But it is interesting too, I think, because we had talked when we talked about the 1995 version about when it was decided that Darcy was socially awkward or shy, you know, and I think again, Colin Firth maybe toys with elements of that. But Matthew McFadden leans very heavily into, this isn't a mean person or even a particularly proud person. This is a person with severe social anxiety who is, again, a little bit of a drowned puppy in the right circumstances. And he doesn't necessarily snap the same way, I think.
Yeah, he does. And it's a performance that holds together cohesively in that world. And the novel's not called Extreme Social Anxiety and Prejudice.
No.
You know, like and so, you know, I will comically lean into the fighting against this version.
Yes.
I will
comically lean into defending it, because again, like you said, it's a coherent performance. I cannot fault it that he read this as, okay, But actually, I think probably a lot of the source of his angst is social anxiety. But you're 100% right, which is the source material does not necessarily support that.
Yeah. And again, like, I will limit my beef with it to the idea that every adaptation is going to be a reflection of its own age. We can pretend it's not true, but it's true. And even in Bingley, like, she was supposed to say this and I was going to say this, has an energy of elder millennial men trying to be a little more in touch with themselves emotionally, a thing that I love about millennial men, and applaud. But it's not Darcy, right? And the thing,
but it is something I like about adaptations, which is that they tell you as much about the time in which they are made as the source material, which is this. They looked at this and went, okay, this is 2005. What is it about these men that we like that will appeal to a contemporary audience? And they're like, okay, it's that they're socially awkward, that they are not, arrogant and mean, but that if they come across that way, it's because they're just saying the wrong stuff consistently in a social setting. Yeah.
I think, and it lets Darcy off the hook though, a little bit.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And the peaks of his personal journey get a little rounded and sloped, because if we're just watching a socially awkward man sort of learn to express himself, it's just, for me, it's less a big transformation. And maybe this gets to the heart of what gets lost in Keira Knightley looking into a mirror instead of Lizzie saying, until this moment I have not known myself. I think even in compressed time of a film, give us the jagged peaks of their transformations. That's why we're here. And I feel like they're rounded off, that we see Darcy who still longs to kiss her instead of a Darcy who loathes himself for wanting her and gets sucked into self-preservation that lasts for months. I feel like, it's a hot moment, but it's not that moment that I love from the novel.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Let me.
However, just let me jump in though, in answer to your them both in the rain. Hand flex. Oh, the hand flex.
That was earlier, right? When you guys are in the carriage.
Wet shirt in the rock, paper, scissors of Darcyisms. Every time hand flex.
Okay. I can support that. I that hand flex. That's
and it's good. The self-preservation. I think why it speaks to me why it's so hot is that's a guy who doesn't want her. See that
self-preservation right now. Yeah.
That reads as Darcy to me.
For those who don't know, in the beginning, towards the beginning of the film, when Elizabeth and Jane leave Netherfield, Darcy hands Elizabeth into the carriage. And then he turns and he walks away, and there's a close-up of his hand, and he kind of flexes it really hard. It's
why don't I recreate it for you right now? Here, let's see. Okay. He's just like walking by, and it's like, So hot.
But see, that's one of the things I like about this film, which is there are some big things it gets wrong, but it's a lot of little things it gets super, super right, which I do appreciate.
Good. All righty. We have a couple more questions. I might hit a couple of those, but first I'm going to take a momentary break and let everyone know that coming soon, we have some great Turnabout the Room guests for our show. We'll have Stephanie Barron, who writes the Jane Austen mystery series, next week. Then we'll have Collins Hemingway, who writes Jane Austen historical novels. And then Dr. Alexander L. Ames, who is a curator at the Rosenbach, will join us to talk about tea in the novel, a tea drinking in Austen's time and in the novel. And I will drink tea that week instead of my usual cocktail, which will be nice. Let me also take this moment to thank all of you for watching this episode. As a nonprofit organization, the Rosenbach Museum and Library depends on the generosity of friends and supporters like you to keep programs like this free and accessible to hundreds of fellow Austen lovers worldwide. If you'd like to donate to the Rosenbach, you can do so on our website. You can also become a member. Membership gives you free museum admission, discounts on programs and courses, and exclusive invitations to member-only events. You can learn more about how to become a member on our website. And at the end of the show, I give a shout out to all those who have donated or joined as members since our last show. I'll do that today. Lots of great in-person, virtual programs and courses at the Rosenbach coming up. Our new course schedule is up. There's a William Butler Yeats class, a virtual class that starts later this month, which I'm very much looking forward to, and a Robert Burns course that starts next month. There's a Middlemarch course, a virtual course. It's sold out already, so that's very good. Casey's doing the reactions for me as I do
They
that.
sound so great. That Burns night coming out, that sounds so
Burns
good.
night will be fabulous. But there's also a course as well, an in-person course where we not only have a great Robert Burns professor, Steve Newman from Temple University, teaches Burns, but we'll be pulling out that class in person. We'll get to handle the letters and the books that we have in our great Burns collection as well. So there's also Austen Mondays merchandise still available. We still have a very few t-shirts, stickers, and buttons. You can find that a link on our website, and also a Facebook group, Austen Mondays, for lots more info, news, links, conversation, and fun. I highly recommend you all jump on that as well. Back to this. Let's try to wrap this up fairly soon. We had a couple questions here, and I'll also answer some questions. Oh boy, Cassandra told me, note to add, there is a tea vodka, so I could still mix a cocktail. I have used tea in cocktails, and that's not an unusual thing to do, actually. I mean, I've had some already, and even one of the punches I had earlier in this Austen Mondays was a tea base in it as well. So
great,
I could
right?
do that.
Great, yeah.
It'll be my dry January will be one day. So there you go. No, I'll probably drink after the show. Someone asked a question, and I want to very quick. There's a few historical questions, and I think I'm going to answer some of these in the YouTube's comments section about pigs walking through the main floor of Longbourn, and the kind of the representation of the country dance, and the way it's done. I'll have some comments about that on YouTube as well, and then Mr. Bennett being a gentleman farmer, or the movie is that just a movie interpretation? It's the movie interpretation, but there's some, I can go into more detail on those on the in the comments section. But this, I also want to touch on this. Someone asked about the camera movements in this movie is fantastic, and I think they are, and especially in these dance scenes where
the ball is amazing.
Both the country dance and then the Netherfield ball, and the way that camera follows them around in the dance and really brings you as a viewer into it.
And around, like, through people's conversations. Yeah. And it never stops. And
as a theater maker, it makes me really jealous. It's like, oh yeah, no, I can't do that. Yeah. the way cinema has a way of drawing your focus to intimate moments within the scope of a large ballroom. Yeah, it's absolutely gorgeous.
Yeah. And then there's a whole, even as the film begins, there's a kind of, not only is the setting and the scenes are very hectic and busy, but the camera does that as it moves around with everything, the clutter all around the rooms, and the camera kind of helps us see all of that and the lives, and hey, I've lived it, what it must be like in a house with 5 daughters and parents and animals. It's hectic and busy all the time. That energy level is almost always high at least when everybody's home. So. I have one last thing to ask you guys about. I mean, no, I don't. I have 87 things, but I'm going to ask you about one last thing in this movie, and that is this whole pastoral setting that goes on, which I think is really beautiful. I mean, there's this whole pastoral opening in it with Elizabeth reading a book, out walking in nature. You immediately cut to cows and farm and laundry hanging outside, and that kind of realities. But it's also a very much a natural setting. There's this one particular shot that I love, which has nothing to do with the story, in which she's on the swing, and then suddenly you get this scene with the farmers, and one of them smoking a pipe. So I always love that. But it's like a Bruegel painting suddenly has broken out in this movie, but the great shot of Elizabeth and then out on the rocks in the Peak District, looking out, and this is her right up top here on the rocks. This gorgeous shot that just kind of reminds us of the scene in the movie. And then there's the brooding Darcy, but you're walking through the mist in the morning. But again, this shot is just as much about this natural setting as it is about what they're trying to convey with his character walking towards her like that in the morning just before the sun rises. Kathleen, maybe I could start with you on this, because it really seems to tap into this idea of the pastoral that might have come out of 18th century novels, and something that did, and Austen mentions in other works, affect her and the way she wrote and the way the pastoral influences romance relationships. And
well, she's obviously she's coming off a kind of Rousseauian sense of nature as idyllic. I'll admit that I'm not as up on my pastoral literary criticism as I could be, but I mean, I just know, even just from the Gothic, that there is definitely certainly in 18th century novels, and Austen is certainly responding to that, a sense of finding one's identity within the natural world. This is where you go to process grief. This is where you go to feel awe. The sensibility is, intrinsically connected to one's appreciation of nature and placing oneself in nature. And of course, you get the, what are men compared to rocks and mountains, recurring joke. And I mean, I again, Lauren would be better at this than me for knowing Austen specifically and the relationship with nature. But I can also say too that from a contemporary perspective, again, it's the Emma Thompson Sense and Sensibility that we're out of the drawing room. That there a lot of Austen ostensibly takes place over a tea set in a drawing room. But what if we remove it from that? What if we have these conversations outside? What if we make this kind of a love letter to pastoral England? And I do think these films do, interestingly, offer a kind of Englishness, Britishness, at a very interesting political time. From a class perspective, it's kind of fascinating too, that this is rural area. I don't think that the 2005 version is particularly political, but certainly in other I don't even want to call them adaptations, because Pride and Prejudice and Zombies is a genre mashup, and another one I really like called Death Comes to Pemberley, which is based on a P.D. James novel, which basically places a murder mystery in Pemberley. Those are much more class specific. They want to unpack political issues such as social class and how that plays out in a rural setting versus an urban one. So the possibility certainly is there, and that's something that obviously we contemporary people are very fascinated with. What is the urban identity? What is the rural identity? How do we cope with global warming and climate change in that kind of concept? So our awareness of it, weirdly, definitely, I think, echoes Austen's original thing, which is we are our emotional connection to nature is extraordinarily complex, and definitely something that is more dynamic in an adaptation sense, and also in the source text, than just putting it, in kind of a sound stage drawing room and leaving it there and leaving it static. So yeah.
I would add to that being a wide release film, it feels like there were some moves made to express the cultural and class stakes for an audience wider than a British audience. And so, pigs wandering through the kitchen feels like a little shorthand for contemporary Americans to be like, he's richer than her, and they're in trouble if they don't do something. That you look in the drawing rooms of Longbourn of the 95 P&P, and unless unless you're paying attention to know what an entail means, right? They don't look like they're in trouble. So it feels like another one of those compressions. But for me, it for me, it over romanticizes something that still feels, for me, the bougie Anglophile, a little aspirational. I feel like the aspirational is lost in Miss Longbourn.
It's interesting too, the longboard, but also the Rosings. We were watching something and I was like, they've created a tableau vivant in this drawing room where they're all just standing there like they're getting their portraits done. Yeah. And that the Rosings Park stuff is so dark. Like you mentioned, it's a really dark, and the contrast of, again, this is another Joe Wright's vision thing, where the interiors are for Rosings are so dark. Mm-hmm. And where Elizabeth, where we clearly place Elizabeth is standing on top of a cliff in the Peaks District in full natural sunlight. I think that contrast too very much in terms of film language is very much there. Yeah.
But I could see that's why the criticism is leveled of, it's a little too Bronte, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. If it were
a little too Wuthering Heights. Is that Kate Bush? Oh, there she is.
Yeah. So if we were dealing with Charlotte Bronte, we'd be lingering on furniture more.
Yeah,
but that's.
I mean, if I'm okay with throwing zombies in Pride and Prejudice, I'm certainly okay with throwing Heathcliff in Pride and Prejudice. I'm really okay with it. Like if you make it work, then I like to look at it.
Yeah.
Unpopular opinion: give me Heathcliff absolutely nowhere.
Oh.
No. I'll take Tom Hollander as Mr. Collins.
Yes. I was going to say, okay, so all right.
Heathcliff of any level of hot.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
You can bury me.
I only heard the first half of that sentence. And I was like, no Heathcliffs.
You can bury me and he can long for me and still no.
Well, then let's move. Speaking of Heathcliff, there was an actor that portrayed both Heathcliff and Darcy, and that's Laurence Olivier. And in the 1940, film.
Thank you for saying that, because I was sitting here going, wasn't Laurence Olivier Heathcliff?
And it was just only the year previously that he had been Heathcliff in Wuthering Heights with Merle Oberon, and now he's Darcy in the MGM film with Greer Garson. And it is
Garson's an interesting choice.
It is. It's directed by Robert Z. Leonard. The script was written by Jane Murfin and Aldous Huxley. Yes, of Brave New World.
Really?
Was a screenwriter at that time. As many, writers end up going, American and British wound up going to Hollywood and working on screenplays, and Aldous Huxley did as well. But it was based on a stage play adaptation by Helen Jerome. There's a really interesting little article about the making of it that was in Persuasions, the Jasna journal, that I'll share in the YouTube comments. That actually Harpo Marx himself of the Marx Brothers saw the adaptation on stage in a pre-run. Might even have been in Philadelphia, I'm not sure. And contacted Irving Thalberg at MGM and said, this would be perfect for you guys to make as a feature film, and they could have Thalberg's wife, who's Romeo and Juliet with Leslie Howard. What's her name? I can't remember her name. Maybe somebody will throw it out there for me. A perfect vehicle, Norma Shearer, perfect vehicle for Norma Shearer at the time, and they didn't get to make it, and then Thalberg died, and then but MGM still had the property, and they paid a lot of money for it too, so they kind of felt like they had to make it, and they get Olivier, they get Greer Garson, and it plays very much as one of those MGM.
I wouldn't have necessarily thought Norma Shearer either. This is
my question is, how did Harpo communicate all of that just by honking?
The short or long conversation.
Yeah, like what? Did you type it out? I mean, look, Laurence Olivier for me can live in reads as high status for days, is attractive despite just rampant snobbery. Again, this is not one of the adaptations I imprinted on. I totally get that it's
Did you even
visual.
watch it all? Did you tell me you were trying to watch it on? You had it
I
like,
did try. And look, I get why it looks like Gone with the Wind. I think we've talked about it in this space before, that it was like, ooh, let's capitalize on the success of that. I get it. No, I can't. There are genres of movies from that era that I love and will watch all the time. I couldn't finish that one. But he's absolutely right. Is compelling and attractive despite all Darcy's snobbery and flaws.
It's fascinating in that Elizabeth is far more rude and haughty than he is in the film too. And it's really, one of the things that makes it interesting is they, in a bad way, is that the sexual politics in 1940 play it up as she's the one that's got to come around and get right with this, rich guy. Because that makes sense.
You want to talk about some deviations from the source material.
Yeah.
Jane, he'll fix himself if he knows what's good for him. Austen, no.
The women must conform to the men in this film. It goes all the way through. But there's another interesting change that happens when the only time Olivier is really haughty in it is at that first ball where he refuses to dance with anybody. And he says in the novel, he says about Elizabeth, she is tolerable, but not handsome enough to tempt me. And I have no humor at present to give consequence to young ladies who are slighted by other men. And in the film, it's shortened, but it's also a key change in it. He says, she looks tolerable enough, but I have no humor tonight to give consequence to the middle classes at play. And it becomes a very socioeconomic class thing. It emphasizes that is what it does. And it made me kind of watch that 1940 film as like the American film studio saying, no, there shouldn't be any difference between we should all be able to be in the rich people, because our system doesn't have the aristocratic blood thing. I mean, we do in a way, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, well, it sounds like, basically it's like audiences aren't going to get this. We have to say middle class, or else they're not going to understand the dynamics here. Middle class, very loud.
But then it makes it a kind of, some of the movies that are played at the time, but just not well done and doesn't deal with the issue, like, the Preston Sturges kind of comedies where, these issues are dealt with even in comedies in a real way, and how people without means can live the American dream. And this movie does that in a weird way too. And I think it's more about that than it is about British class system. Even though they've got all the Brits in it, like they've just brought over all the Brits to be in the movie. So
no one seems to want to politicize original adaptations of Pride and Prejudice too much. Now, please correct me on that. But my understanding from the 1995 and also the 2005, I think the politics of the novel are very much underplayed more. As opposed to let's explore this in more detail.
I think that's one of those things that creeps its way in anyway, and that because it's of its time, you wind up seeing that, but you see it more after the fact and looking back, and how much it kind of modeled itself on those, political views, cultural views of the time. So, and there's a weird thing at the end. I mean, there's no such thing as spoilers. These movies are too old. Lady Catherine, when she goes in, berates Elizabeth. Then she leaves, and Darcy's in the carriage, and he's like, "What did she say?" And she's like, "Oh, she said, that she would never marry, or she wouldn't give me an answer," and blah blah. And they're in on it. Like, she does that to test Elizabeth, not. And that's like a little, that was too much for me.
Yeah, give me a proper villainous lady.
Yes. Yeah.
Even Kitty and Mary at the end get a bow. They Mary's playing piano, and some guys like,
everyone must be married.
All the women got to get married off. So.
We think that's an Austen thing, but actually it's a 1940s thing.
But it is, if it's really old for me, it's really only one of those, if you like those old studio big pictures, especially the historical dramas, it's enjoyable and it works for that. there's an archer. It's where the Emma, the Gwyneth Paltrow Emma, I can't remember the director, gets that archery scene from. So that's where it's they do that archery scene in that movie. So
let's stay here, it's cozy.
Yeah.
Cut to his giant house behind them. Yeah.
Well, there's another big one too that we should mention, just because it had so much influence on Austen fans, and that was the previous BBC TV version that happened in 1980, which was very big at the time. I mean, it certainly never hit the kind of pop culture explosion popularity that happened with the 95, but it happened. We had Elizabeth Steele on the show a few episodes ago, and that's her favorite, and that was the one that she talks about when it came on TV. When it was like everybody was, there had never been any, I mean, on American TV especially. There were some of on British TV over the years, but for American TV, they didn't exist, these adaptations. And it was not just a feature film, but it was like a 5-hour miniseries that you get to watch the whole thing unfold. And how exciting it must have been in 1980 for these people to see this, you've been poring over these books for years, and you knew it was going to be a faithful version to the novel, and all these characters and scenes coming to life, with the hands down haughtiest Darcy in the history of Darcys in David Rintoul. So much so that I never believed that he's changed. Like, no, come on, you're still so hot. Like, how could you possibly be nice?
It would take so much to make you come down to a level.
Have you watched all of these or impressions of this one?
Well, as I said earlier, it's I think I came of age with the 95 and therefore saw only the late 70s, of my very small childhood in that 1988, and couldn't get past the claustrophobia of the sound stages. So yeah, no disrespect to it. I already had the thing that I loved.
I grew up watching those. So, I mean, some of my favorite Dickens adaptations where there's a great David Copperfield from around the same time. That's, I mean, those walls are even a little shaky when doors closed. But I just love those at the time for that long format of bringing these books that I liked, or sometimes before I'd even read the books, bringing those to life and introducing me to those stories. Kathleen, do you?
I haven't. I have to admit I haven't seen it, but I do very much appreciate. I mean, I have. My parents have told me about, that they went the beginning of recording, like they would tape the VHS stuff. I feel like we did have VHSs of that adaptation, but they were quickly overwritten by the 1995 one, which everyone just liked and was rerun then occasionally on TV. So I was kind of aware it was there, but I think by the time I got into Austen, I was just I had all these other options to go with. But I mean, I have a great appreciation for the older serialized, like again, you mentioned the Granada, Jeremy Brent, Sherlock Holmes, all the old masterpiece things, a lot of the mysteries. I just feel like those were such great programs, and when they started, the BBC started making them, and they started coming over here, and just that cultural interchange is really fascinating to me from a definitely.
Yeah, it was never. Masterpiece theater was not part of my mom's TV watching tradition. So growing up, it was not part of mine. My parents didn't watch any of that stuff. That was like the only one in the house. Whereas my husband is originally from South Africa, came to this country as a child, but very much in a colonial English like cultural upbringing. And so that when we hear, and now of course we're masterpiece watchers, and when we hear particularly that like previous theme song, he's like, I'm having such a sense memory, because of course I want to watch the show right now, but also like 11-year-old me is like, oh, I have to go to school tomorrow. I'm watching something boring. There's a great, this feels like an adaptation. There's a great little spoof from an Irish comic trio that really sort of hit during the pandemic. It's Foil Arms and Hug.
Foil Arms and Hug. I love them.
They're so good. I saw them in Philly a few months ago. They are great. And they have a little like spoof. I encourage you all to find it. It's called An English Period Drama. And there's a moment of
sarcasm only an Irish person could have about English period drama.
The moment where their mom's like, oh, look at the dresses. And the teenage boy's like, oh, yeah. We still quote the Foil Arms and Hug. They say things like, I'm 45, I'm in the prime of my life. You're 18, you're over the hill. It just makes sense. Like I encourage it for it. It's so silly. And it really nails the whole work that we're talking about. Just nails us.
One of the things you might, Casey, first of all, this is my Masterpiece Theater showed this, BBC, when they came up with their own act, and even the Penguin Classic, this is their design for Pride and Prejudice. It's so weird. It's actually, you can't really see, it's actually a photograph of a boot. And then this is just
she's not even, her nakedness is even less real.
She's not even in the boot.
I want to know where that, I'm not a graphic design mind, but I want to know where that came out relative to the release of The Graduate. That has a very like 60s pop culture.
Graduate 67, I think, or 68. So yeah, this is much.
The ankles.
Yeah.
Hate it.
You might find very interesting, Casey. You're talking about the bad marriages and that kind of thing that happens. The 1980 Mr. Bennet he has the same lines in the novel, but he's very severe in them. He's not good-natured. His satirical comments come off as really mean-spirited, except when he's talking to Lizzie. But it kind of creates this anxious edge to all the proceedings that take out the funny in the novel and the funny in the way you can portray it, and especially in contrast to the 2005. That's like, it's a portrait of good marriages and hopefully you can have one too. And this one it's very much a portrait of a bad marriage. Mr. and Mrs. Bennet are like, he hates her in this and treats her horribly.
No. I can't imagine a Lizzie who would love that man.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Yeah.
Invalid. Yeah. He has to be whatever. Look, I think there's always room for interpretation, just like there's room for our interpretation, each of us as readers, to pick up the thing that most closely aligns with our experience and our worldview, right? A novel interpretation is extremely personal. I'm not expecting everyone to have my interpretation, but he's got to be a guy Lizzie would love because she loves him and she is who she is. So
it's like that meme. They are valid and they are wrong. Yes, you're valid, but it's wrong.
But you're wrong.
FYI, valid. But
I guess that the 95 BBC that Mr. Bennet hits me well, because I think he is funny and charming, but also underlying all that, he's done all the wrong things, and I believe that. And the 2005 with Donald Sutherland, he's just nice in it. I mean, he even goes to the assembly ball. After he corrects Mary at the Netherfield, he winds up comforting her while she's crying, and he's hugging her, and he's way too nice. He's lying in bed.
I think it's consistent again with the film, but it's not consistent yet with the other.
Yeah, this is a shallow way of expressing this idea, but he's too tall. Mr. Bennet does not have tall guy energy, right? Like his satirical eye is about having lived with too much of a smallness in the world. That is not a slight on compact persons. That is an expression of a scope of life. And Donald Sutherland just like moves around like a giant. Mr. Bennet is not a giant among men. That's shallow.
All right. Let's what about some of these others? Or how about Bridget Jones? Because I know, at least especially the novel's a favorite of yours, Casey. And I still really like this movie a lot, even though some people who love the book really didn't like the way the movie came out. And I really like both of them. Go ahead.
Well, so I reread some of Bridget Jones, a novel that was very important to me. It came out in 99. So I read it as I was in graduate school, just graduating from college. And I will say, like, some of the treatments of, there's some casual racism in there that does not age well for a white reader who is dumber as I was in 99. But yeah, it feels a little like our conversation around the 2005 is I'd watched the movie so many times, I'd forgotten the differences from the novel. And the movie softens a lot of the novel. It softens a lot of Daniel Cleaver, who's the Wickham character. He is, much more like the bastards I actually dated in my early 20s than it feels like they got Hugh,
Hugh Grant, they can't get too,
you're like, right,
can't be too awful.
Romance. So yeah, it felt like you can feel the compression and they soften some things. But what I love about Bridget Jones in both it's on the page and on film is that she is in so many ways an opposite to Lizzie Bennet. Her foibles are so much of the like Y2K self-loathing, trying to be more career woman, deeply insecure, fat shaming culture. But because it's so much of its moment, you see a woman who's trying to think bigger than what her immediate circumstance and her culture and her messaging have told her to do. She's not even a tenth as strong as Lizzie Bennet, but she is a woman trying to be more progressive than her moment. And yeah, she was, I don't know, as having just graduated as a literature major from college, to read something that was at once very foul and felt profoundly truthful and like my life was kind of a revelation for me when I read it at 20.
Kathleen?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't actually read the book. I've seen the film. And yeah, I mean, I very much enjoyed it. It was not, I can't speak too much. I enjoyed the film. I loved the stuff. There was, again, I can recognize again parts of it that don't age well. In what universe, and I know I lived through it, did we ever think Renee Zellweger was a large person? I don't that was considered overweight, and I look back and I'm like, okay, sure, yeah, why not?
In the novel, she's something like 129 pounds and worried about her weight, and so in the novel it really is about like women were socialized to hate themselves no matter. I appreciate it definitely from that respect as a kind of cultural artifact of looking back and being like, God, it's amazing how that did define. I mean, I do think it's great that I think it spoke to so many insecurities that I was having when I watched the film, and that women had at watching the film, not necessarily even just about weight, but just the self-presentation element that I thought that was definitely very interesting. I think also too, Ed, you made a point one time that you about the 95 that you never felt particularly threatened by Wickham, that Wickham maybe wasn't attractive enough. And something I did like again about later adaptations where Wickham is, I mean, in the 2005, that's basically a knockoff Orlando Bloom in there, and I think he was dating Keira Knightley at the time. And if your choice is between Colin Firth and Hugh Grant, oh gosh,
I think he's in it too little.
I want to watch him fight in the street. That's what I want.
Yeah.
I think there's a little too little him in the 2005, which is a shame. I think that was one of the things that they had to pare down, which would have been better to have a little more Wickham in that.
Yeah, but he's one of those where I'm like, okay, yeah, I could see how he would definitely be outpacing perhaps a Mr. Darcy. He's beautiful enough, again, as a sort of knockoff Orlando Bloom, to be a threat.
Yeah.
And
it's fascinating in Bridget
there are other
Jones
ones where they have had very attractive, I thought.
To do Hugh Grant against type as
him,
and I think it's I mean, I think it's the best Hugh Grant's ever looked is in that movie too.
Yeah.
Like they give him these shots, the way his hair is and all, and he looks so kind of dreamy, more so than other films that he's done.
Yeah. I mean, more so than Sense and Sensibility, where they clearly have him basically in a dog collar, for most of it, like a cone.
It makes that kind of, appeal for his character so much stronger than, when
having him
lying, it's like, come on.
Yeah, and having him and Colin Firth in it, I think is such a brilliant self-referential series of casting choices. That there aren't so many movies. I mean, I feel like this is a problem sometimes with rom-coms, is sometimes you get the feeling like, despite being a rom-com, air quotes, they're not necessarily made for women. They're not necessarily made for people who like romances. They're sort of almost made to placate those kind of people. It's like, here's a formula, dash it off, send it in.
They're apologetic about themselves.
Yeah. Whereas I feel like this was like, hey, you like Sense and Sensibility. You liked the Pride and Prejudice. You are tangled up in this very modern perception of what you're supposed to be as a woman. And while you're tangled up in that, you're also reading Jane Austen and wondering if if there's more to romance than diet culture. And the brilliance, I think, of Bridget Jones's Diary, even despite some of the things I think that date it, is that it does capture that, it is for fans of Austen. And it is for a wide range audience of people who really love this material.
It can bring another generation into that world.
Yes, very much.
I don't know if you know this since you haven't read the novel, but a little like gift for you is that in the novel, Bridget is obsessed with Colin Firth in
Yes.
They had to cut.
I hadn't read the book, but again, yes, that and to have that as a not oh, isn't it silly? Aren't you kind of a silly, likely female reader who doesn't like heavy literature? You like reading romance, aren't you kind of a little bit dull? But instead having it be like, no, it's okay to like romance. It's okay to be obsessed with the Sense and Sensibility. It's okay to be obsessed with the Colin Firth Pride and Prejudice. There is more. You can have this kind of nice, let's actually make it a romance as opposed to just sort of making it something. I think at its core, that's such a lovely, instead of being offensive to fans, it's actually being like no, it's good to be a fan. It's good to love romance. It's good to read that. That can be something really wonderful that you can enjoy and that makes you better and want better things for yourself, as opposed to just sort of being, oh yeah, this is trashy and it's a distraction.
That's beautiful. Yes.
Yes.
I would add to that, it ultimately celebrates not knowing and feeling uncertain and feeling like an idiot in a world, which is a feeling that never fully goes away. I don't know. And maybe that's gendered, right? Maybe that's how women, particularly like cis women of an age, or have been socialized to be, as I have. But Bridget never pretends. Well, the comedy sometimes comes from her pretending to know things she doesn't know, which the men do in that film and in life all the time. But ultimately, she just takes ownership of the fact that she messes up. And I think there's something really powerful in that. And as I get older, I celebrate that of like, I don't know, that being comfortable in the world can be comfortable and like, I just look like an idiot.
The heroine identity has been an issue in literature since literature basically was invented. So I think that's the kind of work again. And I mean, we've talked, I'm sure we'll continue to talk about fan culture as it surrounds Austen and Pride and Prejudice in particular, and things like Lost in Austen, things like Pride and Prejudice and Zombies in Austen, and Death Comes to Pemberley, and Fire Island, and all adaptations really are making that argument that that this does have value, you can be the heroine. That's a good thing to be. This literature has, you just keep doing it. You keep making new things with it. And that's something of value, not something where it's like, yeah, slap a chitlit sticker on it and just dismiss it as having any kind of weight to it.
Yeah. And that can be queer, and that can be BIPOC.
Yep.
When I saw previews for Fire Island before I watched it, I guess I assumed Bowen Yang of SNL would be the Lizzie character, right?
Let everyone know when Fire Island came out just last year, 2022, and it was a Hulu original movie, and it's Pride and Prejudice with a bunch of gay men on Fire Island in Long Island. Mm-hmm. Retelling the Pride and Prejudice story,
and a diverse set of friends who are also queer on Fire Island. I guess I just assumed from the trailer, Bowen Yang's going to be Lizzie, right? Not seen as the most beautiful, but really smart, really clever. No. To my astonishment and delight, Bowen Yang is playing Jane. Just that sense of like, oh yeah, this small, slightly nerdy fella is considered the great catch by, I don't know, this beautiful doctor visiting Fire Island. There's something that felt subversive even about that, of like, not only what does Lizzie get to look like, and that our bodies can change and the problem of the heroine can change, but who gets to be kind of the aspirational one can change too. And I find that I think different communities, different aspects of our culture and other cultures taking this story and adapting it for their own audiences and for their own purposes, I think is a beautiful tribute to the aspects of this story set in a very particular place and time, a tribute to the universality of what Jane Austen understood about human nature. I think it's extraordinary.
And it's funny and it's very moving. I was really, it does that. If I'm not tearing up at the end of, one of these kind of films, then it hasn't really worked for me in a sense. And I'm totally tearing up at the end of Fire Island. I mean, it's really, they just, it's the same story. So I know what's happening, and they do it in a way that's, that is the rom-com formulaic way. And I'm still completely thrilled and really hits me emotionally at the end, because these actors are playing it really well, and it's really well written.
It's unapologetic in its sexual frankness, which means it's not for all audiences. But
it's raunchy. It's very raunchy.
Oh, it's so raunchy.
People, it's very raunchy too.
Yeah,
so if that's not your thing, there you go.
For all audiences, and for me, that's okay. That is the Jane Austen for the people who appreciate the Jane Austen in different worlds of that stuff. I am a little biased. I will say, I was telling Kathleen and Ed before we started, is that Conrad Ricamora, who's now making his way through film and TV and has been on Broadway. He was a Philly guy. He started his acting career in Philadelphia, and I know Conrad personally, and I loved his Mr. Darcy. It was awkward in all the ways that an expression of a 2022 Darcy, the way he's like, oh, I have to dance in public. It was just like, yep, that is capturing the spirit of aspects of this novel. And it is reinterpreting, but totally understands the source material. Just like, I'm going to fit it in here, Wishbone, dressed up in Regency garb, getting awkward with Lizzie, and then walking away is for sure a Terrier's version that's absolutely keeping with the source material.
Ride or die with Wishbone. I would, yes.
Here he is, Wishbone as Darcy. There you go. I had it all ready for us.
The only man anyone ever needs. Look at that.
Little paws in front here.
It really is so much of classic literature was I introduced to with this dog. It's amazing.
For people that don't know, Wishbone was a public TV series, a PBS series, and Wishbone had his Sam, I think his name a young kid in it who was his owner and Sam's friends, and they would have a dilemma that they had to figure out. And Wishbone, it's just a voiceover all the time of Wishbone, and he would then take a classic novel, and there would be scenes from the classic novel with Wishbone in them, acting with different people. And then by the end, they all learn a lesson.
Yes.
And this one, it was about, because the book, they described Pride and Prejudice as, it's a book about people and parties. And and it's all about how the cool kid mocks the other ones for how they're going to dress going to the dance, and then Sam's like he's got to get the right sneakers and the right clothes to wear to the dance, and by the end what you learn is how we dress will not matter in the light of how we behave. So that's,
unless you're wearing Regency outfit.
In which case Casey might kill you.
You can get away with a lot if you do it right.
Yeah.
We have all seen, have we not? And on the YouTube, you've all seen the 1-star Amazon review of Pride and Prejudice, have you not? 1 star out of 5, and I quote, "Just a bunch of people going to each other's houses." Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Exactly. Well stated.
Well, when the AI overlords come and erase all novels or remake all novels as computers, as they're now apparently going to do, it probably will be, Jane Austen, 2 sentences long, person goes to someone else's house.
We didn't get to talk, so we kept mentioning Pride and Prejudice and zombies. Kathleen, 1 minute.
Yes.
Pride and Prejudice and zombies.
Yeah, Pride, Prejudice, and Zombies, very interesting monster mashup. I enjoy it. Not everyone did.
Book, and there's a book and a movie.
There is a book. I really like the book. The movie I thought was interesting. We've got Sam Riley as Mr. Darcy, who I thought was quite dour and very good, and Lily James as Elizabeth, and a Charles Dance as Mr. Bennet, and a eye patch wearing Lena, is it Headley or Healy from Game of Thrones? Headley. As Lady Catherine as a sword wielding Lady Catherine de Bourgh. The whole premise is that zombies are taking over London. Everyone is learning either Japanese or Chinese style martial arts. Chinese for the sort of lower classes, and Japanese for the more aristocratic classes, in order to fight off the zombies. There are parts of it that don't work. Wickham, I think, is kind of an antichrist figure. They've got this whole subplot with the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. I think it's interesting in that, obviously, if you're going to make a film about zombies, economics and class inevitably seems to come into it. So it is an interesting kind of clash of the two. And there's a lot of potential there, I think, for conversations about that. I don't know if the movie necessarily manages to do everything it purports to do, but it does kind of reframe that proposal scene where they're kicking Darcy and Elizabeth. Well, Elizabeth is beating up Mr. Darcy essentially while the proposal is happening. And there are very elaborate fight scenes kind of interspersed with the rest. So there are interesting points to it. I'm a huge horror movie nerd though, so I'm willing to give it a lot of slack. It's just, I didn't walk into it thinking it was going to be very good, and I wasn't wrong, but I was entertained by it. So that was, it's worth a shot.
All right. I'm going to have to get on my haunches so I can properly okay. For the film, Matt Smith, second only to Tom Hollander in Mr. Collins's. I thought it was ridiculous. Great. Lily James is great. I like To Kill a Mockingbird. For me, the film is better than the book. So let that catch fire in the chat. The book, I have a visceral experience of getting to about page 70, trying to be generous, and literally hurtling it across my house, finding my copy of Pride and Prejudice and rereading the whole thing in 2 days. Because in this novel, Lady Catherine wields a sword. She wouldn't be Lady Catherine if she wielded a sword. Lydia wouldn't be Lydia if she had spent time in Japan studying the art of zombie hunting.
You maybe missed this, but Lady Catherine has robot monkeys in the book. So I just
making her too proficient. If they would have canceled a ball in the middle of a zombie outbreak. If they hadn't canceled the ball, there's no way that Darcy would show up unarmed. It's that kind of stuff. It's return to the source material. You want to do something cheap? Great. I love cheap. Do it well, though. Prove to me that you can twist the thing that is beloved and show me you understand it by making it cheap, not by making Darcy unarmed. I hate that. But I thought the film, and that's not to say I don't like cheap. Again, we were talking about, Kathleen mentioned Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter. Yeah, get in a fight scene where Abraham Lincoln is chasing a guy running across the backs of running horses. Yes,
yeah.
So cheap and
Completely
improbable.
ridiculous, and it never tries to be anything else, which is great.
Yeah. But you know what? I would believe that Abraham Lincoln, if anyone could run against wild horses' backs, he would. And I would not believe that Darcy would show up unarmed for anything. It's just a matter of like, understand the thing if you're going to profit from it.
And I do like something in the monster movie mashup. For Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter, slave owners are vampires.
All right.
And in zombies within Pride and Prejudice and Zombies, again, it's a class thing. So I do very much appreciate monsters equals politics. That's cool.
Good. All
Which
right.
I think that those films handled something in a satirical, smart way.
I actually like both the book and the film. But
no, you must pick.
One of the things I especially like about the film is that they kind of cast it as, I want to see this cast in Pride and Prejudice. I mean, I think it's cast really well for Pride and Prejudice as well. And it almost makes me want to see them do that, make that version without zombies.
Straightforward.
I like that cast a lot.
There was some casting in that as well. Not everyone felt that way. But like Matthew Good as Wickham.
Very dangerous, man. Very dangerous. Yes.
Yes. Yeah, and charming, and I have something with that film. Don't give me a Darcy and Lizzie who aren't in who have lost their mental connection to each other. Not interested in that. But
But I mean, I was just fascinated too from a historical perspective. It was really interesting from a crime. If anyone's interested in crime, 18th century crime, that P.D. James, who has written loads of murder mysteries, basically did her research on this really great and I think there's some artificial angst in there, again, Darcy and Elizabeth not necessarily connecting as much, but I did like both the actors playing Darcy and Elizabeth, and it really is a fascinating, like, hey, what if there was a murder around this time? That was pretty cool.
Well, we, of course, didn't get to talk about everything. Of course, we wouldn't. We didn't get to talk about Lost in Austen, which is a really great BBC I think it's BBC, or is it ITV? I think it was BBC. 4-part series in which a present day Amanda Price goes back in time, switches place with Elizabeth, and she's in Pride and Prejudice. And of course, everything gets messed up. All the couplings are different then, and Bingley likes, and everybody likes someone else. And I think it's exceptionally well done and really worth watching. And it's one of those things that really, it's the kind of thing that it's as much about how we adapt those works and how readers respond to those works as it is telling a story in and of itself. And it's a very meta Pride and Prejudice series that is endlessly fascinating. If, like the lead, Amanda Price in it, who's obsessed with Pride and Prejudice, and even the 1995 Colin Firth, like in it, and kind of what would happen if she was in that world, works really well. So.
Yeah, I liked it too. I liked it. Certainly, it starts early in the novel, and that Lizzie Bennet can walk through a cupboard into the modern world. I absolutely believe she would want to do that. And again, that feels faithful to the source material of a young woman breaking out of the strictures of her time period. Wanting more than her lot. And she hasn't fallen in love with Darcy yet, so of course she wants to get out of there.
All right. Well, we can't hit more. Unfortunately, there's the Bollywood film Bride and Prejudice, the Lizzie Bennet Diaries, that you can watch on YouTube. So many more that we could have hit, but maybe we'll have to do another special thing on this. Janeites, thank you all for tuning in today. I want to thank our show sponsor, Lisa Washington. I want to thank all of you who have donated or joined as members over the last week. Your support helps us bring this show to everyone, create other one-of-a-kind programs and courses, and also helps us care for our collections at the Rosenbach. And I want to thank Lorna M. of Lafayette Hill and Richard B. of Cary, North Carolina, who joined, who made donations. And also that many of you have also joined the Rosenbach as members. Rosenbach membership gives you free museum admission, discounts on programs and courses, and exclusive invitations to members-only events. And we had Lucille P. and Rebecca R., both of Philadelphia, who became members. Anitra D. of New York, and Heather S. of Los Angeles, California, who are now members. It really is true that this show would not exist without your support. Remember, we have an Austen Mondays Facebook group where we can continue the conversation. Look us up on Facebook and join in there. And if you're, as you're watching this video on our YouTube account, remember to go down, like the videos, and subscribe to the channel and leave comments there as well. I'll also throw some of these questions we didn't get to hit today on there, and I'll answer those over the next week. Thanks to Brianna, who is our chat, Mrs. Reynolds, for managing the links in the chat. And thanks to you guys, Kathleen and KC, for taking the time to talk about these adaptations with me this week.
Thanks for having us. This was great.
Yeah, I've looked forward to it all week.
All righty, everyone. Join us on our next episode with Dr. Lauren Nixon. Hopefully, we'll be able to join me to talk about chapters 39 to 41. Lydia takes charge of the Bennets, and we'll see how Lydia becomes a more central character in this novel. And of course, Stephanie Barron, who writes the Jane Austen mystery series, will take a turn about the room with us. Thanks to Tucker Christine, who wrote our opening and closing credits music. Thanks to my daughter, Lulu, who shot and created the credits with me. Farewell, readers. May all your boiled potatoes be excellent. Bye-bye, everyone. And bye-bye.